Hi there, this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, and welcome to another 10 films that should get a criterion / eureka / arrow / pH indicator release. Again, these are just 10 random films that I feel should get kind of more love and a really nice release by one of those labels. Again, so no specific order, and let's begin. I believe this is part 5. So the first one up is Yorgos Lanthimos' Alps. I do have a real soft spot for Lanthimos. Don't worry, it's not a giant disc, I'm just putting it closer to the camera. The first film of his I saw was Dogtooth, which is the story of a father who keeps his family essentially in the house at all times. It becomes a prison and they're protected from the outside world, and until obviously the outside world comes to them a little bit and the kind of order is broken up. So I think that was his third film. His first film was Kineta, which was about a group of people who reenact murder scenes. And then he did Alps, which is another wonderful offbeat concept, where it's a group of people who are available for families to stand in for their dead loved one, which is quite wonderfully done. I just love this film and Lanthimos' all of his films really. He's one of those guys that, I mean, he's now 45, and I do think he's right up there with the best filmmakers in the world at the moment. He is fairly unique. Again, very much like David Lynch, he doesn't seem to be influenced by other films or other filmmakers. He doesn't explain a lot to his audience. You just have to kind of figure it out for yourself. But I just love this film. It's got in all his films, he kind of has a dark sense of humour, and this is just, I think, his best early one, and it just deserves a Blu-ray upgrade. The Lobster, which was his first English language film, I absolutely love. I think it's one of the best films of the last 10 years, but I understand also why other people can't stand it. And he is a bit of a love it or hate it director, but I generally really like his stuff, even if it doesn't always work, or you do need a few repeated viewings. But The Alps is a great wee film. It's got a unique concept. Nobody's really done that before, having people replace dead family members, and they dress in a certain way and they act a certain way to help the people with their grief. But one of the Alps, it's called the Alps because they each call each other a mountain from the Alps. Yeah, and it stars his regular collaborators, and it's just a great wee film. So that's Alps, which is number 1. The second film, which you can tell by the disc, really deserves a lot more love, and it's Things Change by David Mamet. And there's not much point holding up the disc because it's double-sided, one with a widescreen version and one with a 4:3 ratio version. I'll just put the disc down because there's nothing to see. This was Mamet's second film after The Wonderful House of Games, 1987. This is a 1988 film starring Don Amici in his second last film role, and Joe Mantegna, fantastic Joe Mantegna, whose links with Mamet go back to the Chicago theatre days. Just as a side note, Joe Mantegna starred in the theatre production of Glengarry Glen Ross, and when the film rights were sold, Mamet came to him and said, "I'm sorry, but you're not actually getting the film role. That's going to Al Pacino, who they tried to get in the theatre, I believe. But that's going to Al Pacino." But he gave him two scripts, and one of them was House of Games, and the other one was Things Change. And then he would do Homicide in 1991 with Mamet as well. So those three films are really just fantastic, almost perfect films, and for a director to start out his career with three films of that calibre is quite impressive. Things Change is a bit of a departure for Mamet, but also not really. It's not a swear fest, it's actually a PG. It's about a shoemaker, played by Don Amici, who, because he bears a resemblance to a mob boss, the mob are going to pay him money while he's in prison if he confesses to a murder that the boss did, but because, again, he looks like him. So again, it's another Mamet film about identity and things not being as they seem, which runs through Mamet's work. And Joe Mantegna is the low-down mob guy who gets to treat him... Well, he's supposed to stay with him for a weekend until the court starts, but he takes him for a long weekend at a resort to make him enjoy his weekend. And obviously he plays up the fact that he's the gangster boss. The local mob, wants to know why he's there. Everybody treats him differently because he's a mob boss. And it is delightful. It's one of those films you can actually say is delightful, which I don't term films too often, but again, it's still got that Mamet wordplay. The regulars are there. Bill Macy makes an appearance like he did in House of Games. It's just an absolute joy. And then when they get back to Chicago, things don't work out the way they thought they were going to. And it's just an absolute gem. And I really feel it ought to get more love, and it certainly, for Don Amici's second last film, it deserves a Blu-ray release for all the great work Don Amici did during his career. So the next one is another change of pace. This is Defence of the Realm from 1986 with Gabriel Byrne and Greta Scacchi and Denham Elliott. And this is, I suppose it's kind of closer to a TV movie. It's not that cinematic, but it's one of those films that people used to make, like in the 70s and early 80s, conspiracy films that are actually intelligent, conspiracy films that don't tell you everything, don't explain everything until the end. Films that actually put the audience in with the main character so that you only know as much as he knows. Gabriel Byrne plays a journalist who stumbles upon a conspiracy involving spies and army bases and such. And again, it's one of those conspiracy films that actually ends the right way. I won't say anything more than that. But sometimes conspiracy films can be a little bit unrealistic as far as their resolution's concerned. One man taking down an entire organisation or whatever. But this is, again, it's not particularly cinematic, but It's well acted, well written, and it's a really nice little film. Speaking of really nice little films, this is probably not one. This is Gozu by Takashi Miike, or Miki Takashi, from 2003. And yes, I have a smile on my face. It's Takashi Miike. This is kind of two films rolled into one. It's about a man. This actually starts similar to Things Change, in actual fact. I didn't actually realise that until I've actually put them together. About a lower member of the mob taking a mob boss to the seaside for a little bit of R&R because he's embarrassed the clan. There's a scene with a dog, which I won't explain anymore, but you have to believe it to see it. No, you have to see it to believe it. That's how it goes. Yeah, and then it changes because during the trip, the mob boss disappears, and so the underling has to try and find them in this very weird town. So it's pretty much Yakuza, cows and ladles. And I'm not going to say any more than that, because you literally have to see it to believe it. Arrow has obviously released quite a few Miike films, and I'm not really sure why they haven't done this one, because it certainly deserves a nice Blu-ray print, because some of the images in it are wonderful, and it is one of those films, if you're to show somebody what Takashi Miike is about, this would be on the list. And if I ever do a top 10, I'm intending to do a top 10 at some point, this would definitely be on the list. Gozu from 2003. And the next one is arguably Francis Ford Coppola's most underrated film. It's not Jack, don't worry. It's Gardens of Stone from 1987 with James Caan and James Earl Jones. And they are in Arlington Cemetery in their jobs to bury soldiers who come back from Vietnam. I love this film. Maybe I'm biased because I'm a huge James Earl Jones fan. I have to admit I'm not the biggest Francis Ford Coppola fan. I know that's sacrilege. I would say Apocalypse Now and The Conversation are way better than The Godfather. I'm not a Godfather fan. I just don't really see why people think it's so great. I know I'm weird, but I prefer Gardens of Stone to The Godfather. I know people are just going to... heads will explode at that statement, but never mind. This is just a great character piece. Again, there's a great line by James Caan about how in Vietnam the soldiers had a saying, killing is our business and business is good, and he says, well, burying is our business and business is better. It's really just a lovely human touching drama with great turns by Jimmy Caan and James Earl Jones, and I think it has kind of been forgotten about, and it really needs kind of reappraised. Gardens of Stone, 1987. And speaking about filmmakers' forgotten films, this is Powell and Pressburger's 1950 film, Gone to Earth, with Jennifer Jones and David Farrar. Not sure he wears shorts in this one. There's no nuns to drive mad, so he maybe doesn't wear shorts. And Cyril Cusack. This film, when it came out, this was produced by Selznick. I think, I'm not actually sure how that came about, whether they had ended their relationship with Korda, and they ended up with Selznick, and Jennifer Jones was Selznick's wife at the time. So this was kind of a vehicle for Jennifer Jones. And Selznick disliked the film that they made. So he recut it as Wild at Heart and released it in America, but took out a lot of plot points and a lot of scenes, so like 2/3 of the film kind of remained, and it was a bit of a mess. But this is the proper version, restored, and I think it deserves a Blu-ray release. The Criterion and other labels have done a great job of restoring Powell and Pressburger films, but there's still a few that need a Blu-ray release. Canterbury Tale, one of my personal favourites, The Spy in Black, and this one, Gone to Earth. I mean, it's absolutely beautiful in Technicolor. Jennifer Jones is the wild woman that David Farrar is trying to tame. There's lots of shots of foxes. The colour red is very prominent. It's very earthy film. It might not be their greatest work, but when you're talking about Powell and Pressburger, that's pretty lofty achievement. But for me, it's still a 4 out of 5 star film, and it really needs a Blu-ray release to make those colours pop, because it is a beautiful film despite its flaws. So that's 1950's Gone to Earth. The next film is an unusual little film. It's, again, there's not much to look at in the disc. It's Made for Each Other by John Cromwell, who's a filmmaker I've never really heard of. He made 49 films in the 30s to 50s. And this one stars Carol Lombard and Jimmy Stewart. And you would say, hey, Carol Lombard and Jimmy Stewart, this is going to be a knockabout screwball comedy. And it's really not. It is put down as a comedy. It's about a couple who get married, have a kid, hoping Jimmy Stewart's law career, he goes up the ladder, but it doesn't quite work out. And then their kid falls ill. And so it kind of starts as a romantic comedy. And then they get married, and then the problems start. And it's really quite a dark film. And, you know, again, you keep thinking, you know, when's the screwball thing going to happen? And it just doesn't, because it's quite bleak. Their kid falls ill. There's a scene where they need to get a pilot with the right medicine, and he's flying through a storm to get to them and stuff. And it is really downbeat. And I think it really deserves more attention, because Jimmy Stewart gives one of his best performances that nobody talks about, and Carol Lombard gives one of her best performances, because she's always kind of seen as a kind of light actress and kind of a deft touch for comedy, but this is a bit more serious. And I'm very happy the fact, obviously, To Be or Not to Be is on Blu-ray, and My Man Godfrey was recently released in the UK on Criterion Blu-ray. And I recently picked up a Kino Lorber Blu-ray of Nothing Sacred with Carol Lombard. Obviously, it's tragic what happened to her. She died so young. But it is good that we're getting Blu-ray releases of her films. But I do think Made for Each Other, because it's Jimmy Stewart as well, it really should get a Criterion release. It's kind of made for Criterion, because they are really good at finding those old films. So I'm not sure whether it's a print issue or maybe a rights issue, but Made for Each Other, 1939, Jimmy Stewart, Carol Lombard. It's more serious than you think it would be, more downbeat than you think it would be, and it really needs another look. So the next one is My Favourite Year with Peter O'Toole. You can see this is a Spanish DVD I have. As far as I know, it's not available on Blu-ray, and again, please let me know if I'm wrong. This is a wonderful little comedy sending up 50s US TV, and it stars Peter O'Toole as an ageing movie star reduced to making TV because he has a bit of a drink problem, and Mark Lynn-Baker as the lackey who's to try and look after him until they actually shoot the show, which obviously hilarity ensues. This was apparently based on a real life incident, and Mel Brooks was actually the lackey and Errol Flynn was the ageing movie star with a drinking problem that he had to try and control. It's a wonderful performance by Peter O'Toole, and in the end it's actually quite moving. It's got good support, Jessica Harper as the love interest, and Joseph Bologna, yeah, I can't pronounce his name, as the star of the show, who's a little bit feels encroached upon by Peter O'Toole's movie star. It's a nice little comedy. It's directed by Richard Benjamin, who was in Westworld and went on to have a fairly solid directing career. But for some reason it's not on Blu-ray, and that really needs addressed if anybody's watching who has the power to make Blu-rays. Yeah, it's a lovely little film. I saw it on television years ago and just fell in love with Peter O'Toole's performance. Peter O'Toole's one of those actors, for me, a bit like Robert Shaw, who never made enough great films. They kind of made lots of films, but not many of them were actually truly great films. Please correct me if I'm wrong, if I should check out any Peter O'Toole films that I haven't or I should know about. That's my favourite year. So the second last one, you'll be happy to know before this video's 3 hours long, is The Riverman from 2004. This is a nice little, I'll say nice little serial killer film, I don't know, an oxymoron, starring Bruce Greenwood and Carrie Ellis. Carrie Ellis in a career kind of change performance as Ted Bundy, and he actually gives a really good performance as Ted Bundy. This is the loosely true story of Bruce Greenwood's cop who, in order to try and catch the Green River Killer in Seattle, goes to speak to Ted Bundy to try and get some inside information. A bit similar to Will Peterson going to see Brian Cox in Manhunter. And it's a really solid little psychological thriller. And actually, in doing research before I did this video, I actually realised there is a US Blu-ray, which I have since ordered. But I think it deserves kind of Arrow treatment. This would probably be a good Arrow film. Again, it's not showy, it's not flashy. It's maybe more kind of TV movie kind of style. I'm not sure this actually ever got a theatrical release. Again, it's one of those films that I saw once late at night and then it disappears forever. But it's a really solid little film. And again, if I ever do my top 20 serial killer films, which I'm working on, don't worry, I'm working on all these top 10s and top 20s, it'd certainly be in it. A well acted, disturbing little film, The Riverman. And finally, a biopic that's a little bit different. It's 32 short films about Glenn Gould, the Canadian pianist. Now, before you fall asleep, this was directed by Francois Girard, who also did The Red Violin and Boy Choir. This is 1992, and it's absolutely awesome. Most biopics, as you all know, kind of start from a period of the subject's life and goes through chronologically. This happened, that happened, this happened, that happened, then they die. This goes at it from a completely different angle and literally is 32 short films, which doesn't really follow chronological events in his life. It just kind of takes a part of his character or an event that happened to try and explain what makes an artist tick. And it's just a fantastic film. It's only 90 minutes, so even if you don't particularly like one of the short films, there's another one coming down the road quite quickly. And it is, I think it's one of the best films about trying to explain what makes an artist without actually going, he was born here, he did this, he got married there, he died here. It's Colin Farrell who plays Glenn Gould, and it'll be a radio interview, it'll be him talking in a diner, it'll be him, the character never actually plays the piano, even though his music is featured in the soundtrack. I would recommend you getting if you like a bit of Bach, because when they released, or when they sent one of the probes into space, they actually put a recording of Glenn Gould's Bach variations in it for the aliens to listen to. Yeah, it's just a great film, a fairly unique film as far as biopics go, and certainly different in the format and the better for it, because sometimes biopics can be a little bit dry and predictable, whereas this is completely unpredictable, and it's just a great film. So that's another 10 random films that I would like to see getting a Blu-ray release by one of those top labels, Criterion, Eureka, Arrow, and I think now Powerhouse Indicator deserves some credit. Again, I've only got about 14 indicators, but I think they're really good titles that I have, and their extras are comparable, if not better sometimes, than the other labels. So thank you very much for watching. This is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films. I hope the video wasn't too long for you, and thank you very much, and hopefully we'll see you again.